Today we'll be presenting orbital networks, otherwise known as satellites, by myself, Desire Jones.
Me, Michael King.
And me, Adrian Garcia.
So, what is a satellite? So, to start off, a satellite is basically anything that orbits a larger object. A natural example is the moon orbiting Earth. But in most cases, when we hear the word satellite, we're actually referring to the ones made by people, otherwise man-made satellites. Because they're positioned in space, they're able to reach way more areas than land-based systems. Right now, land-based networks have a lot of limits, especially in rural or hard-to-reach areas. Satellites are helping fix fix that by making the world more connected and making information move faster, whether that's for us individually or for the companies and services we use day to day. First, we have geosatellites. Geosatellites, otherwise known as geostationary Earth orbit. These are positioned around 36,000 kilometers about above Earth. They're used for services like weather updates, broadcasts, TV, or any like lower speed data. For instance, you could say direct TV. A geosatellite stays in the same spot over the equator. So to use on the ground, it looks like it's not moving at all. That's because even though these satellites move at around 17,000 miles per hour, they rotate with the Earth, which is why they're called geostationary. These satellites have gotten a major boost from HTS, which is high throughput satellites, which are designed to handle way more data, making them even more powerful to communicate. Because of their high position and consistent coverage, they're great for reaching areas that ground networks can't.
The next type of satellite is an MEO satellite, and these are middle Earth orbit satellites. They hover at an altitude of 5,000 to 20,000 kilometers, delivering mainly GPS and other navigation applications. These satellites are special because they bring fiber-like performance to remote areas where laying fiber is not viable. So think of remote areas that are extremely mountainous or areas that are in water where it would be very inconvenient or even impossible to lay cables, such as on cruise ships in the middle of the ocean or offshore oil rigs or other formations in the water. These network backhaul or other network backhaul in difficult terrain, and they also help with humanitarian relief operations. These satellites travel extremely fast, yet slower than geo satellites at speeds at around 7,000 miles per hour, which allow them to travel across Earth's surface several times a day. The last type of satellite we'll be talking about are LEO satellites. These are low Earth orbit satellites that hover around 500 to 1,200 kilometers, primarily, primarily addressing science, imaging, and low bandwidth needs. One of the companies you've probably heard of that specialize in LEO satellites is Starlink. So all the Starlinks that you can sometimes see in the night sky are low Earth orbit satellites. You can sometimes see them at night flying across the sky, and that's what these are. These specialize in mass consumer and enterprise broadband internet, so sort of your everyday internet needs that your computer or phone would connect to. These satellites travel fastest of all the others at 18,000 miles per hour, allowing them to travel across Earth multiple times a day. Next, we'll talk about how businesses are approaching satellites, which businesses are, and then we'll apply the Porter's Five to explain sort of the competition that these businesses face. The first of the Porter's Five are threat of new entrants. This field isn't really seeing too much threat of new entrants because of how much the capital investment takes to reach that. So it's very expensive to get your initial satellites in orbit. So new entrants are very hesitant to do that. That's why there's only a few companies in this space, which we'll talk about later. Next is the bargaining power of buyers or suppliers. Because there's very few suppliers of satellites at the time, they really have a lot of control over pricing and different things that consumers wouldn't have as much say in, even though there is that higher buyer demand. And the companies that are in the space are SpaceX, which you've likely heard of, but also Amazon is getting heavily involved in the space as well. The next of the Porter's five are threat of substitutes. So the main substitutes that satellites face are, as we talked about earlier, fiber cables and 5G networks. But as we've discussed, orbital networks are offering things that traditional systems don't have, like global coverage. The next of the Porter's Five is industry rivalry. So even though there is only two companies in the space, they do kind of form an oligopoly, but there is that rivalry there because they're both competing pretty heavily for market share. And again, those are SpaceX and Amazon. And also, there are competing interests in the government and government-backed initiatives that are also working to put satellites in orbit as well, especially for military uses. The last of the Porter's Five is the impact on business models. So there's several ways you can go about attaining a profit from satellites, but Amazon and SpaceX have sort of settled on subscription-based services where a customer pays a monthly or yearly fee and they get the dish, and then they pay a yearly or monthly fee to receive the connectivity to those satellites or telecom companies.
We spoke about the business side, and with the business side, there is a lot that goes into that, but you also have to think about the consumers or the opportunity side. So, with just like with business, there's a lot of options to get remote access, being that satellites are coming from space. So there's a lot of customers who live out in the middle of nowhere or live on a remote island or want to be on the boat and still have internet. This is where we can reach out to them um, because we have that global internet access. With this, we also get lower latency because whereas like a cable would have to go so many meters to try and reach somebody, and that slows down or may take interference or may have to resend stuff because it's lost. You don't really get that with satellites. Most satellites can be communicated in within a matter of seconds to milliseconds on a bad day too most of the time. So you have that improved latency where you can game, you can do cloud, you can do financial trading, telemedicine, stuff that has to happen in an instant or people could die. And so that's where satellites really play a huge role. But even more than that, you have disaster and recovery services, whereas, like, say a tornado goes through an area and it takes down a bunch of power lines and knocks over a bunch of trees or could take out a whole internet site, right? Or there may not be power. You can set up one of these dishes and start communicating with satellites in a matter of seconds. And that could be, again, the difference between life and death. So for the consumer side, there's a lot of reasons of why satellites really just beat out traditional land-based networks. But speaking of also on the consumer side, we have businesses that also count as consumers, such as the military. And so a big thing for both consumers and the military itself is secure communications. With regular networks, you have a line, it goes across a power line, it's always going to be there. If someone wants your information, they know exactly where it's going to be and where they need to connect to get it. With satellites, you can set them up anywhere, any time of day, and all you got to do is start making that connection. Take it from me personally, I've set up STTs to talk to satellites just about anywhere in the world, and it just takes like that. And so, with not knowing where the information is going to be, or what the information could look like, it just adds that extra layer of security of you have to find it, decrypt it, and catch it. And that's just why satellites are just so much better at staying encrypted and not releasing people's personal information or being able to be captured just by traditional means. So, if satellites are so good, why doesn't everyone use them? Well, there's limitations to technology. So, not everybody can have a satellite just sitting in their backyard or a way to communicate with a satellite sitting in their backyard because normally you would have a dish to communicate with a satellite. That being said, there's also weather issues. Sometimes, like traditional commercial satellites can't be talked to if it's super cloudy. Second to that, let's say you have a lot of trees around your house. You may be able to communicate with a satellite at 12 noon when it's dead in the sky, just like the sun is. But as soon as it goes this way or that way, you might have trees or brush or stuff blocking it, or a building or just some large object, which A lot of people work around this by putting their dishes on their house, as you've seen, and stuff like that. But that still is a limitation for the satellite itself. Then there's cost of use. So not only back to the subscription thing, do you have to have a subscription to be able to get the dish itself? But not everybody can just talk to the satellite when they want. They are incredibly fast at switching between data. But if everybody had access to it, then it would really slow it down just like any network. And then there's huge regulatory issues and legal issues. So, being that the government has a huge backbone in how satellites operate, they would like control over it. And then we have other huge parties, as mentioned in the introduction, with DirecTV and other stuff like Dish. They also don't want their customers to lose the information that they're trying to give them. You wouldn't want your customers to tell you that their TV's down, because then they may not want to buy your service anymore. So that's where regulatory stuff comes in. And then with security and privacy, as secure as satellites are, a lot of people don't like that their data is just sent over the air because they believe anybody could grab it at any time. And that can happen, though it is very rare. And then when it comes down to privacy, nobody wants a satellite watching their house. Plenty of people have expressed their concerns about that and have a huge disliking for stuff of that nature. But given all that, there's some cool stuff about satellites that I love to tell you about. So we have the first satellite, which was launched by the Soviet Union, and its name was Sputnik, and it was in 1957. It was really the beginning of the space age and how people, wanted to see what we could explore in space. And from there, it grew. It grew so much so that we have about 2,500 satellites currently in orbit around the Earth. The downside to this is a lot of those satellites turned out did not make it because they were not prepared for space. Space is super harsh. So being that, I would like to show you one of the biggest concerns for satellites, and that is stuff in space. And anybody can go to this website. It's not just like a only I can see it type thing. And so what I'm going to show you is this is all of the debris in space, and a good majority of these are satellites. So to give you reference, or the key chart for it, you are looking at dead ones, which are gray, and active ones, which are red. And you can see how fast they're flying and stuff like that. These blue ones are actually rocket debris. So it could have been because they took up a satellite. It could be because of something else. I normally try and find Starlink, but I just probably don't have time to do that. Starlink are normally your faster moving ones, so they're a bit easier to find. Like maybe this guy right here. So that was actually in 2008 that one was released, and it is low Earth orbit, and it is moving at 7.64 kilometers per second. So some move faster, some move slower. It just depends on what they're trying to do. But yeah, that's stuff in space, and I recommend that you go check that out. And that is why we started Space Force, to kind of regulate the downside to all this stuff in space. So, but in conclusion, orbital networks are redefining how we're going to use internet because of their global access and the business opportunities that they present because of that. Then we also have job displacement in traditional telecom because, the day and age of using just regular land-based stuff is going away. And satellites take so much to operate and are such a big resource that they're creating so many more jobs. And then the continued innovation of it is major because a lot of tech companies want to get behind satellites because of the growth that they're showing and how they're leading to the future. And then, again, one of the biggest downsides, especially for me, is the ethical and environmental concerns with the congestion of space debris and stuff like that, because there's just so much stuff in space. But all that being said, with the improvements of fiber and high throughput satellites, this will be how the internet would be used across the globe, and really how the world will change in the future. Currently, with the people leading this, we have Starlink, and again, DirecTV is still back there along with some government entries. But yeah, that's why satellites are such a big thing nowadays. So I want to thank you for checking out our presentation, and if you have any questions, I guess leave them in the comment section below.